Welcome to the Thought Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Sanchez Castañeda. Let's jump right in. Welcome back to the Thought Leaders Podcast. Today, I have a thought leader in the career development strategy space. I'm joined by Evie Suarez, and I want to know if somebody right now just graduated college and they're going for their first career job, what should they be looking for?
Anything that's going to give them a breadth of experience. I think sometimes we become so fixated on the company's name or the company's journey or the company's mission. And I think people forget that our career includes a lot of different facets and pieces. And it's not, I worked at XYZ huge company, Fortune 500, that makes me. It's my experiences and my career. I started my career in a manufacturing company. And at this point, I can't tell you, like, oh yeah, the manufacturing company was so glitz and glam and sexy. No, it wasn't. But the experiences I learned from there, man, I can't tell you. They were amazing. The things that I was able to draw out from there, the people I got to meet, the opportunities that I had to be able to grow my career, really propel, accelerate my career. Those are things that I was never going to be able to get if I was so fixated on working with a company that had a huge title or was on a Fortune 500 list.
And I think that also speaks to people loving to work for small businesses versus the big businesses because you get more of a role. How does someone know if they are better set for a small business versus that big name?
I think you try both if you can. I think, sometimes it's when you're graduating from college, if you're at that point in your life, it's wherever you can get in. I think your education is going to be a factor in that. Your experience in your community, in your college, or things like that are going to be a factor to whether you're going to get into a big name company or maybe a small business. So at the beginning, it's where you can get in, where you can get your feet in and get the hands on work. Once you have that experience, you'll learn a little bit more about yourself. You'll learn what things you like about that company, what things you don't, what you like about the work that you're doing, and what you don't. Some people start off in a small company and they're doing so much they get overwhelmed. Some people start off in a big company and then their job is too specific and they get bored. So I think there's a happy medium for everybody. And I think the more experiences that you give yourself, the more that you'll be able to see what is a better fit for you. And it also depends on where you are in your life. I think our life goes through seasons, and sometimes we fixate ourselves on this is the type of person I am. I only work for these kinds of companies. Yeah, for right now, but maybe my life is going to change in 10 years, and maybe I'll choose to work for a bigger company or smaller company at that point. And I think it's being flexible with ourselves and comfortable with the fact that things might change later on.
And how can someone know what to prioritize when it comes to their next job? Because for some people, it'll be money. For some people, it'll be
Mhm.
flexibility. How do they decide what to really focus on?
I would say, similar to the last answer on flexibility, it's really depends on what your priorities are for your personal life at that time. So don't look at what your priorities were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but look at what are your priorities today. So somebody who, for example, has a partner, has children, or anything like that, their priorities might be very different from somebody who's, let's say, very career driven and wants to just focus on career growth and that. So I think it's choosing, writing down what are all the things that are important to me? What are my values as a person? What are my career growth goals? Do I want to work for a company where I know I can transfer to different departments where I can grow over time? Or is this just a stepping stone because maybe I just need to gain some experience for the next few years, but I don't want to be doing too much? That's okay too. I think it comes to being honest with yourself, writing down that list of your priorities. I think it's super important when you're job searching and you have the job search strategy. Write down your goals. What do you care about? What's really important to you? And also talk to the people around you. You talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your partner, talk to the people that are influenced by who you are. Because if you have a job that's super demanding and it's going to take time away from the time you spend with your friends, then that's going to impact them as well to some degree. And your family, the same thing. So you want to make sure you talk to them, understand what their values are, how they view you, so they can also help you in that decision. We don't live in a box.
That is so important. And so important to also understand that it can change and that it's not all about, just the big name or that which we've been talking about or that it has to look the same for everyone, because I think in the TikTok of it all, people want to give career advice that's very blanket.
Yeah.
And so, is there a piece of maybe unexpected career advice that you got one day that has really stuck with you?
I've gotten a lot of career advice over my life. So it's hard to just nail down, I would say, to one. Something probably that's been very impactful for me is very early in my career, somebody really poured into me that I needed to be able to read the room and I needed to be able to understand who were the people that were in that space. Growing up, I was usually the youngest person in an executive room. I was usually one of the only people of color in that executive room. And I was usually one of the only females, if not the only female in the room. So triple whammy there. And I think it's, being able to understand who was in that room, who I was going to be able to talk to, who I needed to influence for the project that I was leading, who I needed to get on board with me so that we can make that project or that goal come to life, and being able to understand how to carry myself appropriately. And some people might hear that and say, well, you're, putting on a persona that's not you, you're being fake or anything like that. And I completely get that. But I think for me, I did prioritize. I know that there's things that people look at me and they have biases, and that's okay because everybody has biases, right? So I just need to understand, I need to be empathetic that they're going to have biases and I need to help break those down as well. I need to help them on that journey so that, I don't come across too strong or I don't come across too immature because I was really young. I want to make sure that they understand where I'm coming from. And I think that took a lot of self reflection for me so that I didn't let those things show up as barriers, but instead I let them show up as a moment of reflection so that then I could really help that person come along with me on the journey that we were on.
That is so impactful. And I'm I'm curious if there's like a line, if there's a moment where you're like, okay, I can read the room, I can adapt, and then if there's a situation that would make it go too far, or you're like, okay, that's I'm losing myself. Is that something that you experienced?
I could say yes. Probably a few times I have experienced losing myself. I've lost myself a lot in my career because I've been very focused on getting the business goals out. I've been in HR for a long time. So always focus on ensuring that we can get the business goals, we can get the hiring goals, we can ensure that we're just meeting our deadlines. So I've lost myself in just how much time I'm spending, how I'm showing up as sometimes honestly a workaholic. And I think it's important to take a moment of reflection and say, is that how I want to be perceived? And if that is, then that's fine. Let's go ahead and continue down that path. Or if that's not how I want to be perceived, then let's change the dynamic a little bit. What do I need to change about myself so that I show up differently? So I think as long as we give ourselves the opportunity to reflect, then we can make changes as we go along. But if we don't give ourselves those opportunities, sometimes it just takes over us and then we become a different person. We blink and 5 years later, we became this, person that we no longer feel like we are.
Thank you for sharing that. And is that usually a moment where people might be coming to you as a career coach, is when they're kind of in that similar spot?
I think that and many other situations. But I think overall, one of the reasons why people look for a career coach is because they're feeling lost and they don't really have a sense of, I would say, stability for where they want to go. They're not grounded for where they want to go in their career next, or even what their career looks like, almost as if their career has swallowed them up whole and they no longer have any standing and they don't have control over their career anymore. I feel that that's an opportunity where one, we need to reflect, but two, we need to really reevaluate who we are as a person at that time in our life so that we can figure out, okay, where do we go next? And I feel like sometimes we just continue going and going and going, and then we burn out. And then when we burn out, we're so far along that line that it's really hard to come back. I honestly never thought that I could burn out. I didn't think that was possible. It wasn't part of my language. And it got to the point where I did burn out, but I didn't know that that was the term. I didn't know that that's what it would be called. I just knew that I was acting different, that I wasn't able to handle the projects that I normally would be able to do with my eyes closed. I wasn't able to handle the type of things that were coming my way in my career. And that had never happened to me before. So, those were one of the moments where I could have evaluated and could have said, okay, let me sit down and evaluate what's going on, what's affecting me, and why am I feeling like this? And because I got to the point of burnout, it didn't really give me time to sit with it and do something about it because I was so exhausted that I didn't have a clear mind to do it. And I hope to help find people while they're on that journey before they get to the point of burnout.
Wow. I think a lot of us can relate to that and relate to the not knowing until it's way too late. So if someone is listening and they are realizing like they're this close, like they're a second away from burnout, what is, a first step for them to see the other side or at least start to even get out of it?
Talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a family member, talk to yourself, journal and write it down. Get it out of your mind and onto something, so that it's out in the open. Because then either you can hold yourself accountable if you wrote it down in a journal. When you look back, you can say, I want to make a change. Or you told somebody who really cares about you and they can hold you accountable to making a change in your life. But I feel like sometimes we're embarrassed by how we're feeling and we don't get it out to other people, or we're honestly afraid to admit it to ourselves. So we don't get it out there and then we don't do anything about it before it's too late.
I think that there's a lot of self denial. Like there's a lot of like, I'm not that tired. I'm fine. I'll be all right.
Right.
So, what's the kind of like that most common? They're in denial, but like, what's that symptom that keeps coming back, even though they're in denial of the burnout?
Probably that they don't stop. They don't stop to take a breath. They just keep going and going and going because their comfort zone has become this place of chaos and intensity and a lot going on. That's become their everyday life. And I think because they're not stopping, they're not realizing that they're in a point where they need to take a reflection and understand where they're at. So when people are in that phase, they're just taking on more projects, taking on more work, saying yes to everything and agreeing to everything because they don't want to admit that they need a moment to relax. Because if they do take that, then they'll realize how much in over their head they are.
And that moment where you can't even be in silence anymore because you're like,
Right.
it's gonna the thoughts are gonna
It's
come for
gonna
me.
come. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so we're hoping that they recognize, right? And
Right.
they're starting to want a change.
Right.
Does that always have to be a new job?
No, it doesn't always have to be a new job. It depends. There's so many factors that go into it because there's a lot of things that can be causing this burnout. If the job itself is very intense, if the person's been there for a really long time, if the person's boss is very toxic, then I think it's difficult to make a change while you're at that same company. And if you're burnt out, you're probably not going to find any relief by staying there. And sometimes we just need a change of scenery so that it can put us in a new dynamic and we can, start fresh. I think if somebody's very maybe new in their career, or maybe they're new in a specific job, but they were experiencing burnout from their last job and didn't really know what was happening, I think it is an opportunity to make a change and they can stay in the same job. Overall, though, they can stay in the same company and maybe move departments. They don't have to necessarily leave the company, move to another department, move to another function in the company, or something like that that can help guide them to a better place.
That's amazing. And it's amazing to also have that safety because I think there are a lot of people who don't do anything about burnout or discontent because they don't want to leave the company.
Right.
But what about the person who really wants to leave? They're like, I really want to go somewhere else, but I'm afraid that the next company is going to be the exact same.
And I think at that point, it's one, evaluating yourself and see what it is that's causing the burnout. Because many times we don't want to admit this, but there's a big part of us that's causing that burnout. It's not just the job. It's you allowed the job's responsibilities to cross your boundaries. You allowed your boss to put on additional workload that you weren't able to handle and you didn't communicate. So I think it's first taking some accountability and saying, what is happening with me that's also causing this burnout, along with everything else? Once we understand what I did to contribute to this burnout, then we can shift to, okay, what do I need in a new company so that that doesn't cause that burnout. And that's where job strategy comes in, and really understanding, how do I become strategic about which companies I want to work for? How do I become strategic about what questions I'm asking during the interview, so that I can understand what this company is really like behind the curtain, and understand if this company is going to cause that same burnout that I had. But if you don't evaluate yourself and you don't have that moment so that you can really understand what's going on, you might experience the same thing again.
And you were mentioning like knowing what questions to ask yourself and knowing
Right.
what questions to ask that company. Is this something that you're working with clients on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do mock interviews, really help people, one, build confidence in themselves, build confidence in talking about their accomplishments and their achievements, and then also be confident in the fact that they're also interviewing the company. And I think it's important for people to walk into that room not feeling like they are the lesser than just because they're the ones that are interviewing for the company. I think both parties should feel like they're on the same level, the interviewer and the interviewee. And I think sometimes as interviewees, we come in feeling like we're lesser than because the other person is choosing us. Well, no, because we should be having multiple different companies that we're interviewing with, and we should get to the point where we're the ones that are choosing one company over the other. And a lot of that decision comes from my interview, my interactions, and how I felt being at that company.
Mm, so good. How did you get into career coaching? Because it seems like you do love your career.
Yeah.
How did you add this on as a service?
So for me, I did love HR. I've done HR for over 12 years, and I found a lot of success and a lot of growth in HR. I love being in a room with business leaders. I love making decisions. I love figuring out and solving problems that are related to people. But for me, what really resonates is the fact that I grew up as a first generation professional. So none of my family were working professional jobs. And when I had questions about how to grow in my career or my 401k or anything about my salary, a job offer, anything like that, I didn't have anybody to ask. I had to turn to people that I confided in, but weren't really part of my family, people that just so happened to come into my life. And I want there to be a resource for people who are continuing to grow up like me, whether it's immigrants or first generation professionals or people that identify as first generation professionals, right? People that really need help and don't have people that are close in their circle where they can ask these difficult questions. Talking about money can be a taboo subject. Talking about your job growth and your desires and your dreams, that can be a taboo subject, especially if you're growing up in an immigrant or Hispanic household. At least in my experience, sometimes talking about, my aspirations for my career aren't really understood because it's not things that are a doctor, a lawyer, or the military. Those aren't things that, were really understood. So I want to be a resource for people and say, you can talk to me about all of those things because I understand I was in those shoes and I can help you. I can provide you with those tools so that you can actually reach and get to the career of your dreams and not feel stunted just by your current surroundings.
Love that you're being that resource that you wish you had. And I think, I mean, I went into entrepreneurship very quickly, but as also a first generation professional in the States,
Yeah.
like there's so much to learn
Yeah.
and not being able to ask that. And so if there was, when you were first getting into your career, if there was a piece of advice you wish you had gotten earlier, what would that have been?
It's develop a wisdom circle, and I talk a lot about
Ooh.
this on my social media channels and in my content. But it's develop a wisdom circle. So who are those people that you can trust and confide in, right? So if you have, let's say, a doctor in the family, a lawyer in the family, if something happens in your personal life and you need to reach out, you're going to reach out to those people because not only are they skilled in that profession, but they're also people that you trust because they have a little bit of a closer proximity to you as a person, a personal connection. And I think we don't think about life that way sometimes, but I think we should because I think that's what's going to make us successful. I think sometimes we believe that we can do it all. But I will never say that I can be a doctor. I will never say that I can be a lawyer unless I get a JD at some point in my life. Until I do those things, I need to surround myself with people that are experts in those areas. And some of those things, to be honest, I just don't like to do. I don't like to spend my time learning about, stocks and finances. That's not where my strengths are. That's not where my passions are. My passions are in leadership development, personal growth, career development. And I love to learn about it. I love to spend my time doing it. So I say that I think the best way to go about it is to surround yourself with people who love to do what they do and figure out what it is that you need in your life, whether it's a career coach or a contractor or an electrician or whatever else it might be. Surround yourself with people who can do it all so that it helps you in your career. And of course, you're reciprocating, right? So you're giving them also the service or whatever it is that you're an expert in.
So powerful. And I love the idea of a wisdom circle.
Mm,
What if someone doesn't have that? Like maybe they're in
yeah.
that circle where they're like, I don't know, everybody that I know is in one specific profession, or maybe isn't in the level of wisdom that they need in that moment. How can they start to reach out and build one?
Right. I love talking about this because sometimes we just don't do it because we're afraid and we don't know how to start. And you start by networking. That's how you start. That's a 101. And to be completely transparent, I'm an introvert. I do not love networking. It's not part of my day to day. It's not what gives me energy or fills up my cup. But I know that it's something that helps me grow. I know it's something that I need for personal development. So I've put myself in situations where I know I can network with people, where I know I can exchange skills and services with people. And I do that by first figuring out what kind of person I am, what kind of networker I am. I developed a networking personality quiz for people to understand. Are you a reluctant networker? Are you a strategic networker? Are you a social butterfly? And then based on what you are, you can figure out what are my strengths, but also what are some of my opportunities? What are some books that I could read specific to my type that are going to help me grow and develop so that I can become a master networker? Because when you feel confident in walking into a room full of people that you don't know, you feel like you can get to know all of them because you're a master networker, then it will come secondhand to you. And then you'll start building that wisdom circle. A lot of it's also about cultivating relationships, which is a whole nother topic. But I think it's important for first people to get out and network. And before that, figure out what kind of networker you are.
So good. And with networking, are you doing like in-person events, or is it LinkedIn? Like how proactive are you in the networking process?
I would say personally, I'm super proactive now. I haven't always been this kind of person, but it depends on which phase of my life, of course. So when I was working in a corporate job, I was a master networker with specifically things around my job. Now that I run my own business, I am a master networker with stuff that's around my business. So I do in-person events, I do virtual events, I find people online, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, I connect with them. And if there's a feeling there where both parties want to connect, then let's take it a step further. Let's meet up for coffee and let's have a conversation about whatever your skill is, whatever my skill is, or just about ourselves as people. If we meet online, then let's have a conversation. Let's schedule a Zoom call or a virtual chat. Sometimes we're so afraid of going beyond our personal circle, the people that we've grown comfortable with, that we deprive ourselves of opportunities to meet more people. Why do we do that? Why do we keep holding ourselves back from expanding our circle? We almost wait for something to happen in life to force us to meet new people. And I think that's holding us back instead of us getting in the driver's seat and taking charge of this is what I want my circle to look like tomorrow. So I'm going to start developing it today.
That is so important, to be proactive, get out of that comfort zone. Something I know that my audience is a lot of people who are business owners, whether they have a 9 to 5 or not. Do you find that being an entrepreneur can help people in their 9 to 5?
Yes, absolutely. I think being an entrepreneur, and I'm new to this journey as well, to be completely transparent, I'm learning so much. It's putting me in situations where maybe I thought that I was, super advanced at this specific skill, and I'm learning, okay, maybe I'm not. It's humbling me a bit and it's giving me an opportunity to really reflect on where I am in my journey, how I can grow in my personal development, how I can become a better person. Being an entrepreneur just impacts you so much that I think it forces you out of your comfort zone. If you really want to make it happen, it forces you out. So I think when you do this and you, let's say, do it on the side and you have your business and you're an entrepreneur, all those skills that you're taking, those are all transferable skills. My research skills on the latest tech that I can use in my business are some of the best research skills that I've developed in the last 6 months. Now I can take those research skills, and if I was working a 9 to 5, I'd be able to implement those research skills in my 9 to 5. So it's about putting yourself in those shoes, really, really immersing yourself in that entrepreneur life, but then taking those skills into every other facet of your life because those skills are 100% transferable.
Absolutely. I'm curious, especially because your background is in HR, if if maybe some people are worried to start their business because they think that their job is going to fire them for it, or they're worried that it's going to be frowned upon. How can someone proactively have a conversation with the HR at their company about starting a business?
This is a little bit of a difficult topic, and I'm saying it from being in HR shoes, because we did have people that were working in companies where I was HR and they had their own companies, and those were really tough conversations. And a lot of it came down to what are the company's values. Some companies value that people do things outside of the day to day. Some companies are not threatened by it at all. And I think it's first, understand what kind of company you're working for. What are their values? What do they care about? Number two, are they true to their values or is it all talk? If they say that they love people who, follow their passions and follow their dreams, do they really fuel that? Do they give you the opportunity to take a day off to volunteer, for example? That's a company that's putting their money where their mouth is, right? And I think three, it's having a relationship with your boss. Before we even talk about HR, have a relationship with your boss. You should know who your boss is. Your boss should know you. It's not that they need to know everything about your personal life and what you did, last weekend, but you should have a conversation with your boss about what your life goals are, where you feel like your future's going, how you feel like this company is helping you in reaching those future goals. Because if you can't have a conversation with your boss, they're probably not going to be backing you up if HR, let's say, finds out about your side gig or something like that. You want to make sure you have a relationship with your boss so they can stand up for you if that situation arises. So first, look at those things, company values. Do they believe in and really show and model those values? And do you have a relationship with your boss? If all those things are in line, then have the conversation. Have the conversation about your boss before you do it. I've been thinking of doing this. I want to do this. I want to explore this. Do you feel like there's any negative things that can happen by me starting this endeavor? And then maybe at that point, you'll get into a conversation with HR. But first, follow those steps.
Those are really helpful and very, very practical. And I know that there are people who are probably putting off that conversation or using it as the reason that they haven't started their business. So
Right.
if there are people who want to, advance in their career in that more traditional sense, and they want to work with you, what's the best place for them to connect and get to know you?
So anybody can connect with me directly on my website. So it's workwiseguide.com. On Instagram, I'm active. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Facebook, any kind of social media, on YouTube as well. And it's all Workwise Guide.
Amazing. All of that will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing so much of your experience and expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course.